Well, welcome everybody to our Insights Live panel discussion. I will just give it a minute as our participants join us. But we want to thank you for coming on to our 29th episode and the first one here in 2022. So as that begins to load and we start to go live, just want to thank everybody for joining us. So I'd like to begin by introducing our panelists today. We'll just start there in the order of the screen, and then I'll introduce myself. So we have Bryan Parker with PwC. Bryan, why don't you give us an intro?
Hello, everyone. I am the Director of National Real Estate's Workplace Strategy, Policy, and Optimization team. And we are focused on being our trusted experts to our firm's stakeholders and all things related to people, culture, workplace design, and space management.
Excellent. Thank you, Bryan. Really pleased to have you with us. And Isabel Thompson with Uber.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. I'm Isabel Thompson. I'm a senior manager on the global workplace team. My focus is the design and experience of all of our portfolios. So I get the pleasure of working with all of my colleagues regionally to develop and design all of our physical spaces, as well as managing and creating the design guidelines for Uber for, again, our physical places.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Isabel. And Lewis Barker with ServiceNow.
Thanks, Gordon. Yep, so Lewis Barker from ServiceNow. I'm my Director of Real Estate and Workplace for our EMEA region. So that can obviously vary from our operations, real estate transactions, projects, and dealing with the business on a day-to-day basis. Just for scale, maybe we're about 20,000 employees globally and about 3,000 employees in EMEA. So, and a rough square footage of about 3.1 million across the globe.
Fantastic. So pleased to have you and love these webinars for their global representation. And from the Space Steward team, Alex Harvey, why don't you give us an intro?
Yeah, thanks, Gordon. So I'm Alex Harvey, VP of Sales at Space Store. My role here puts me or connects me with many of our global clients, working with them in understanding their real estate and workplace strategies, understanding the challenges and possibly the opportunities that they're looking at, and then how Space Store can support them in realizing those opportunities. So very excited to be on the discussion today, and certainly looking forward to hearing the contributions and ideas and insights that our panelists are bringing us. Thanks, Gordon.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. And so I'm Gordon MacDonald, the Key Accounts Manager here at Space Store, as well as one of our workplace strategists based in our New York office. That being said, I do work with our global clients on their workplace strategy, now more recently the return to the office, and ways that we can help them in adaptability and flexibility, which I think really brings us to the topic of today of what to expect in 2022 in regards to the workplace. What I'd like to do to jump into this, so we at Space Store obviously launched our 2022 workplace trends at the beginning of the year, and we can go through them. Flexibility is the new normal, universal design, etc. But what I'd like to do is kick off by doing a poll, and if we can just get some of the results from that, I think that would steer the conversation around what we're seeing from our clients, what we're hearing in the market. So that should pop up on your screen, and just what resonates the most with you. So feel free to go ahead and drop in your choice there. And as that begins to populate and we get the results back, I think that will help us. But Bryan, you obviously see a lot of things from a high level view, both at PwC as well as from your clients. Tell us a little bit what you feel 2020 holds in terms of the workplace.
Yeah, so first of all, the top trends that you all have identified are resonate heavily with us quite a bit. I would say for us, one of the biggest ones that resonated was the employees becoming customers of the workplace. And I would take that a step further and say that in this new age, employees are becoming customers of their employer. There's a lot more influence and demand that the employee has now that was not there before. So with us, we're seeing a very similar thing where choice has been given to the employee, both on how they're going to work, where they're going to work, when they're going to work. At PwC, we allowed all of our employees the opportunity to opt into 100% remote work if they chose to, and we would reassign them accordingly. Another thing we did is we said we're no longer requiring that you be mapped to a geographical location, at least within the US. So, you know, if you were once mapped to Chicago and you want to go live in Iowa and you can work from Iowa, we'll let you do it. But we're seeing the same thing with our clients, right? They're also in this time of change and trying to understand exactly how they are going to operate both in their built space and just as organizations. So we're seeing it from both sides. We're all sort of in this together and in a time period that we're trying to figure it out. We don't know exactly how our clients are going to respond once things change. We are anticipating that our employees will be coming into the office more often to do milestone events on an engagement or project that they used to do at a client. So we've totally shifted our strategy for collaboration, meeting, and celebrating of the milestones within an engagement.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that actually really resonates well with the poll that we just did. So flexible is the new normal, 73%. You can see it there. Boundaryless working, which is exactly what you were just pointing up, 61%. Sustainable design and employees becoming customers of the workplace. So I think this really resonates well with the conversation that we're going to have today. And I think, as you know, one of the things that came out of the pandemic was really the benchmarks of the workplace kind of were obliterated. And so people began to say, okay, how do we gauge ourselves against our peers? How do we gauge ourselves against the industry? Who you know, what if we had a crystal ball, we would have seen the pandemic coming. So we don't have that. So where do we move to now? So Isabel, why don't you tell us a little bit what's happening over at Uber, and obviously Bryan and Lewis, please jump in with your comments as well. We want this to be free flowing.
Sure. For us, honestly, it's all about the employee, right? And giving them that flexibility of choice. Previous to the pandemic, a lot of our colleagues and employees were coming in about 4 days a week on average. Fridays always tended to be a little light, honestly. But because of that, we had already started the process of assuming that about 60% occupancy was kind of the target we were aiming. So we were moving in that direction to kind of start to redesign some of our projects and locations into more of a hybrid, more fluid, activity-based model. But there was still a lot of hesitation to do so. And then the pandemic hit. And so that was kind of everybody adjusted very quickly and understood kind of what the trends were already happening and showing pre-pandemic, and then potentially what that would mean as we learn to kind of live in this new normal. And as Bryan mentioned, we don't really have a crystal ball, right? We just want to create spaces that are both exciting for our employees to come back, as well as innovative, new, and some that just feel healthy and safe. And that's why a big portion of our portfolio is now focused on being LEED certified, WELL certified, a BREEAM in EMEA. That's all very important to us. And it's part of our pillar and our mission as a company to maintain that, not just in the office space, but overall in everything that we're focused on. So it's really become this entire trend for us to create spaces at the very forefront, which are for our people, that are exciting, innovative, but also inspiring. And that's something that we're really pushing now. We definitely don't want people to come into the office that don't feel like it's safe or that aren't comfortable doing that, especially people like myself with little kids, right, that are not necessarily vaccinated yet. We're kind of hesitating to return to the office. But the reality is some people are ready to kind of get back into being social again and having those cool events. And so we have to have a nice balance of all of that. And so this year, we're really focused on that flexibility of choice for our employees to choose when they come to work and when they are at the office to choose the type of workspace that they need, whether it's heads down space or a more social setting. We kind of have all of that.
Yeah, and I'd add on to that as well. I think we're all on the same page of flexibility is the right way to go. Everyone is in competitive industries as well. So definitely ServiceNow out of the gate decided to be a slow follower, is what we were saying. There were companies out there who were making decisions, the right ones or the wrong ones, depending on which way you look at it. But we decided to, hey, sit back and we'll see what works going into the pandemic. But throughout all of that, it was check in with the employee. How are you doing? How can I help? What can we do better? So I think we're all definitely, seeing that trend, and that will continue, going forward. So in 22, it'll definitely be about, engage, understand what's working, how are they returning. And I think different companies will go for different strategies. And I think that's one of the good things is, or what the workplace and real estate community should do is work together and share knowledge of what did work and what isn't, because we are in a quite unique period, I think, of being able to try stuff that maybe we were fearful of before, because people are in that habit of staying at home and, people are phrasing it of work from home or not, but there's going to be that flexibility. So they're going to choose where they want to do their work, and that's it. So definitely for us, we've looked to put some guide rails around it with what we're calling personas. So we have an in-office persona, which is the expectation of 5 days a week. And that's really for our, front of house staff, security. We have our flexible persona, which we're saying, hey, 1 to 3 days is the expectation. And then remote, which is, maybe once a month, and you come in for what we're calling, moments that matter. So I think it's important to kind of put some guardrails around it, because humans kind of like that, I think, to some extent, not too much control, but, the expectation of, hey, I can come in, because we kind of, on one of your things is the AI augmented reality, but the technology still has a long way to come to kind of say, nudge me and say, my best friend from work's in today, hey, book a desk. We're a long way off that. So I think that's definitely some interesting stuff.
I should just say, it sounds like Lewis and I shared playbooks. So the personas are exactly the same for PwC. And, what I would add to that is this flexibility in the workplace design, and this time of experimentation has really been embraced by our firm. And, very lucky to be in a position that leadership has allowed for that, right? So while we were on lockdown, if you will, we took advantage of empty offices, and in our top 10 biggest offices, we went in and converted a lot of individual space to collaborative space. We did some technology upgrades that would better align with what people are going to be doing like we are today, using things like the Cisco Desk Pro. Those are now in all of our private offices. Fantastic piece of technology for the way we work today. But we know we didn't get everything right? As people started coming back, some of the policies we put around these things, or the way we were allowing people to access space, said it's not working right now. So we changed, and we made some quick adjustments. And I think this is just the right time to do that. I would caution any organization that would say, I'm just going to wait and see. I think you're going to miss the boat. I think right now the time is to act, to experiment, as I mentioned before, to fail fast, right? To try something out, test it out. If it doesn't work, correct it, and level set at the beginning that that's how it's going to happen. And that's been our mindset here. I will say, interesting. So talking about the AI and things like that. So we PwC, I keep telling everyone, is going to become a technology, known as a technology organization soon, not a business services organization. And we have a great development team within our firm. We have an app that we call Astro, and Astro is sort of our go-to for everything. And that part of it falls under my team. And what we actually are about ready to release next month is the ability for an individual to create their list of favorites or their team. And they will see when they have reservations coming up. It'll show them on the floor plan where the reservation is and what available seats are around them. And it's just a click of a floor plan, and it can consolidate teams and get everybody together. So we are heavily leveraging technology to help with this time when people are still a little unsure. How do we work? What do we do? It's not like it used to be. So technology is our friend.
Yeah, technology is that gentle nudge, isn't it? Like, we're starting to nudge people together and say, let's get together. And as we said yesterday, the biggest competitor to office space right now is people's homes. We spend billions and billions of dollars a year on office space, and yet we're competing with somebody's 12 by 12 bedroom. And I think that's the challenge, and having technology like that's fantastic. Sorry, Alex, you were going to speak up before.
I was just going to say to Brian, I think you found your first customer with Lewis. It's like
it's unfortunate because we build our own workplace service delivery as well, so it's maybe not.
But on a serious note, what I was going to ask earlier, and I'd be interested in all of your views on this, was we've obviously had, I guess nearly 2 years now of experience, and we're starting to build a bit of a picture of the direction of travel, not necessarily the end point that we're aiming for, but the direction of travel. What I'd be fascinated to know was, did you see, or do you see that as a change of direction from where you were going pre-pandemic, so Q1 2020, or has this been an acceleration of the direction or an extension of the direction in which you were already traveling with your workplace? Value and thoughts on that?
Yeah, for us, it was an acceleration. We very much were a one-to-one kind of seat to person employee assigned seating model previously. That was pretty standard. And this has just accelerated that experimentation phase and all of the changes that we really wanted to do in order to be more efficient in our space, but also to really provide, like I said, options. We didn't have a lot of options before. Like, you were assigned a desk, you would sit at your desk and spend all day at your desk, maybe get up to go grab lunch and socialize when you're getting food or coffee. But that was it. You'd come in, show up 4 days a week, 5 days a week, 8 to 5. That was like pretty normal. And our company is really built on the culture. It's built on collaboration. A lot of our business lines have come out of those collaboration and those scrum spaces and meetings where people are coming up with ideas about how to connect the platform to different businesses out there, right? So that's kind of what has been missing for our employees. And a lot of our population has never even shown up to an office in the last 18 months or so. So that really is an opportunity for us to allow people to, hey, come on in, socialize, really entice them to come in, not because we want them there, but because we want them to socialize and connect to each other. And ultimately, that's only going to make the company stronger and the company culture stronger as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just gonna say I agree with that, and the fact that you talked about the culture and experience that, and that there are people who are with our organizations, right, who have never experienced an office yet. So at PwC, our traditional tenure length was the average employee had about a 5-year tenure with PwC, right? That was somewhat on purpose, right? And the average age, by the way, was like 27. So it was sort of get them out of college, train them up, and hopefully they go out and work with clients and become a client. But to that point, when I think about that for 2 years now, that's half of the normal length of a career at PwC. They have not been in an office. And I have people on my team they have now since, but not really fully working in a full operating office. They joined during the pandemic and, saw their first office probably about 6 months ago.
And it's the
Yeah.
people connection, right? Sorry, Lewis. I was just
No,
going to say
no,
it's all about that.
Yeah, it is. But I think it's definitely accelerated it in every single silo within workplace. I think it's accelerating the thinking. Whether we actually put it into practice really quickly is to be seen. We're definitely going for, probably more of a pilot approach as opposed to a clean sweep across everything, because culturally things are different in terms of how people show up at work. So, there's that consideration that we've definitely got in our mind as well.
I think that's a really good point that you bring up, because from my perspective, when I look at the portfolio, I support global teams, right? And so regionally, it's very different. Maybe we have a little more hesitancy in the USNC for people to come back to the office, but that's not the case in other regions. In APAC, there is a strong regional cultural element of going into the office, and that's something you need to kind of adjust as you're designing these spaces to really be regional and different, but yet still feel like the spaces that you want it to feel globally.
Yeah, and that comes back to listening to the employee base. And I think as well, that I see a big, maybe the one thing that was potentially missing in this is the large wellness aspect of what I think is going to hit all of us in 2022 and onwards. That you talk about the office perks kind of growing up. We've all done it in tech companies, filled everybody with food and beverage, given them all the games they want, all of that type of thing. And we know that time's kind of over. So is that now community building aspect is a huge thing. And I think now more than ever, the collaboration between global talent acquisition, IT and workplace need to come together and strategize more, because historically siloed as anything, right, in the approach. And in ServiceNow, our GTO organization run Future of Work. As we roll it out, and we're a strong strategic partner with them to kind of make sure that we're all tying into the same message, the same ethos, and the cultural thing's interesting, right? Because we're a US owned company, and I think people who are in a US owned company, they can sometimes tell the pain if they're in another region. It's not really working, but we've definitely gone for a theater approach in terms of our return to office and even our future of work, of how we implement it, especially around kind of, HR policies and legal requirements around working from home and how you support them and all of those aspects. Yeah,
really interesting. So wanted to just reach out to our audience. Please put any questions that you have in the chat box. We're going to go ahead and take one here from David. And I'm just going to rephrase it a little bit differently. So and to Lewis and Bryan, in your personas, do you see those personas working differently within the office? Do they, is persona one more of a, that person that's got to be there every day? Are they fixed to a certain area at certain desks? Persona two is more of a, free floater. How do you design your office around those different personas? And feel free to take that, Lewis.
It's a good question. Yeah, so we're starting to look at personas underneath that. So if you're a flexible persona, we've built personas under the persona. So it's not that we will allocate that to an employee, but allows us to kind of target and build experiences around that. And I think there's a large data element to that as well. So the more data you can glean from the workspace, the better you can make that persona perform. And I think ServiceNow, like, our productivity hasn't dipped. If anything, we're better, and we are in the digital transformation world, so we rode the wave. But it's not like the business is coming to us and saying we need them back in the workspace because the productivity is bad. So if anything, we're kind of building those personas so that we can finesse them, looking at the data, listening to feedback, and then build it kind of that way. So, it might be someone that drops in, uses this space more than that. And then, because we, other Isabel and Bryan, you probably have it, but we have the neighborhood concept. So, we have unassigned seating in there, but it's owned by that department. So they could have 90% assigned if that works for them, or 100% unassigned. And then we build spaces around that team that they tend to use. But, Bryan, what I'm interested to see are we copying each other again?
Almost. So we flipped it, actually. So we had started developing personas a while. That's just been on how we talk and how we do our human-centered design and everything, right? So we already had personas based on the segments in our firm. Tax works different than advisory works, or certain teams work differently. So we started with our personas there, and then the firm did their macro personas of how and when you will work, right? If you're going to be in the office or flexible or remote. But yeah, we spent quite a bit of time doing that, and that's what fosters our designs. Plugging in those personas, it's part of our communication out to share those personas and say, when your team is sort of falling in this category, here's the collection of spaces available to you to meet those goals. The other thing that we have done and spent a lot of time developing during the pandemic is the creation of what we call difference makers. And so going back to that it's more of the cultural health and mental health well-being of employees and groups. We have a vast library now of they're different. We call them difference makers, but they're just little ways of getting to know your team. Ways, how do we better collaborate in a hybrid meeting? It's just a bunch of little pre-packaged, ready to go, plug it in, and rather than just getting on a regular Zoom call and not knowing what you're doing. That has gone over so well, and that also has driven people to or it's given us the data at least to kind of start to look at personas, right? Because if there's a whole group that keeps on wanting to do X, Y, and Z and the difference makers, we're like, well, there's something there. What is it that they're trying to achieve, and why does that group work that way? So we start doing a deeper dive into there. So yeah, very similar thing. Our personas have been around for a while, always being revisited, but we had a very wide variety of personas, and then it just sort of flipped into those three work styles, if you will.
I think it's like tied into the employee life cycle of their journey as well. So that comes back to the IT, because IT have personas, so does HR, but it's that we're very much about the employee journey of how they leverage our technology, ServiceNow's technology, but, and then their journey throughout the whole life cycle. So to your point, Bryan, that's constantly evolving and will do, but I think it definitely helps guide some thinking. Yeah.
Did you have any equivalent thoughts on that, Isabel, and the thing that Uber are doing around?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have personas. We haven't really published them because our kind of employee population is constantly changing, right? And we have a lot of the inclusion of engineering kind of makes a massive pivot into kind of how you plan a lot of the spaces. Before, they were typically our biggest teams that would fight against change. It just is pretty normal. And so they are kind of some of the newest team members that are coming. Their leadership is coming and saying, actually, we're ready for the change. We've seen that they have been successful. There is no dip in productivity during this entire 18 months, 2 years. So we're okay to sign up to, get on track with everybody else. And so right now we're going through that change. It has taken some time. We're a very large company. So having that adjustment is going to take that moment to really see how people are returning. We are giving them all of the tools to be successful, whether it's software, whether it's the physical space and the technology. We just don't exactly know how all these new teams are going to work together. Whether there is a team day during the week where we try to push teams to come into the office so that they can get to know each other. It kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. A lot of our colleagues are new to the company, so they don't have a great connection with even their team, right? We've been very hesitant to push people in because we want the most to do the right thing and to have it be a focus on their health and wellness. And that's kind of been our focus. Let people come in as they start to feel like it's their time to. So in 2022, we really want to deep dive more into, now that more teams are on board with this change and are welcome in it, we want to focus more on creating those personas in more better understanding where we are as a company with the employees that we currently have and how do we support them. So that for us is something that's kind of constantly changing. And we had built personas back in 2019. Those would not be reflective of the personas that we have today. So
I would add to that even the personas that we have today, it is not going to be the personas that we have
exactly
in 2023, right?
I agree.
so along with that, one of the things, we have 500 million square feet across, or 50 million. And people just weren't coming into the office, right? We knew that, it was partly because we were telling them not to. So when we did reopen all of our offices in November, we didn't open up all of our floors, right? Because we knew that the occupancy was going to be low. We're like, why do that?
Mm-hmm.
But as people started coming back in, we were hearing different things. And even though our occupancy was low and we had an idea of how they should be working in the future, they were responding to the right now of,
Exactly.
I'm coming into the office because I'm tired of working in my little apartment in New York. And, but I still want to be, away from everybody else. Why are you forcing us all to go work on these 3 floors when there's 20 others that are shut down? And we heard it. We just had the aha moment. We said, yeah, it makes sense. So we just opened up all of our floors.
Yeah.
We're like, this is not our
win.
plan for next year, but it's responding to the right now. The personas right now are,
Exactly.
I just want to come into the office, but I don't want to be around people.
Absolutely.
And we're like, we get it. We're going to be flexible and let that happen.
And that's key too, right? It's not just the flexibility of the employee, but it's also our teams. And kind of how Lewis was mentioning, we are at the table. We're having these conversations. In the past, workplace was always kind of that dark horse running everything in the background, right? And now you're part of the strategy, you're part of those conversations.
Mhm. Mhm.
How does this all become this whole life cycle of really bridging the employees to come back? And you're right, everything is going to change. I think that's why we're in the industry that we're in, because we like that innovation. We're constantly learning and scholars in the field because we want that change. We want to see people evolve, as do we, right? And that's what this is all about. It's constantly being able to be flexible with your design. I don't think any of us think that we have the best answer at that moment, right? All of it is learning through the experiences that we're getting, and also our people. What are people telling us? And that's going to change. I mean, when I started this pandemic, I try to put myself in the shoes of my colleagues, right? When I started this pandemic, I was like, this is going to be a month. This is great. I had a 6-month-old at the time. And so I was like, this is a blessing in disguise. 2 years later, pandemic, and passing the kid back to back with my husband, who's also working from home. I can't necessarily say I have the same feelings, but that's part of it. That's part of that growth cycle that we should have.
Absolutely.
Great, thanks for that. And interested, there's a few questions coming in which I think kind of really relate to what we're discussing here, which is, I think a lot of this is about choice, giving people the ability to make a choice for what's best for them, maybe what's best for them in general, or maybe what's just best for them today because of whatever they got going on, not just in their work life, but maybe in their personal life as well. So got a question from Miriam, who's saying, how are you looking to encourage colleagues to come in and use the office every day so Friday is not a dead day? And maybe referencing your comments earlier, Isabel. And then Alina is saying everyone's talking about missing their co-workers and connection, but I think most people are happy on their own and are glad not to be forced to interact with their annoying colleagues. But I think with all these things, I guess we have to take these in context and say, well, everyone has a different personality. This is about choice. It's giving people the opportunity of being with their annoying colleagues, if that's how you regard them, or maybe of maybe taking some time when you're not working with them, when you're not close to them, because you want to get on and focus.
Yeah, I think that look, choice has to be there. I think choice and flexibility has to be there for any company to remain competitive. I think if you go on the latter end of the scale, you're risking loss of talent, and we know what the situation is with talent at the moment. I think what we've seen in the experience at ServiceNow is that managers have lent in to give guidance to their teams because, and I wouldn't say it's in a dictatorial way. It's been both back and forth, right? Because we lead with flexibility, but it's providing those guardrails at that local level. So it's not mandated from top down. It's saying, look, we know that productivity hasn't been a problem. You have flexibility. We've given you these guardrails of personas. You go away now and go and deliver what you need to. I think it would be a very different story if the business wasn't performing, and you would need to step in because there's only a certain, you need to remain viable, right? So I think in terms of leaving people to do what they want, then that's okay, because as long as you're getting that productive output. But me and my personal opinion, I think sometimes, whether you choose to do it all remote or choose to do it all in person is important at certain parts of the year, because that connection that Isabel was talking about is massive for kind of that. And not making it all about the office, but when that person does make the commute and they're in, they do say, oh wow, this is actually not too bad. It is a good change of scenery. So, the kind of the dialogue around working from home and the office directly, I just think we need to give it a rest and not really go there. People are going to have a transient kind of life if their company, if their job allows them to do so, and they will. I think we should, have accountability on the employee to do what they need to do. We all have performance reviews, so if you're not performing right, they're going to earmark certain things, and that may be that you're spending too much time at home and I never see you online, but I think our job is to, look outside of the office and provide guardrails around where they can work, because I think speaking from an EMEA perspective, there is legislation out there to protect your employees and do that type of thing. So if they are going out and working somewhere bizarre, then there's been cases in Germany already with someone getting injured from their bed to their desk, right? So there's all these types of things that are going to start to appear, I think. So it's kind of outside of that office context.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's not just the office, right? It's all encompassing. It's that whole routine that we used to have where we would get up, get dressed, whether you're commuting or walking. All of that really is part of that wellness piece. This is important. And I would argue that people are almost ready for that again, right? Like we have forgotten what it's like to do that and get into that. And I don't know about you guys, again, supporting a global team, I'm online at like 6, 7 a.m. in the morning. And then sometimes after my son goes down at 8 or 9 p.m. So there's really no disconnect between my work life and my personal life. You have to set really hard boundaries. And that's all kind of new, right? We have had to adjust and make those changes that I didn't have. I've always supported a global company, but I didn't necessarily have that before. It was a hard, like, okay, I'm going to close my laptop, get on my commute, and then get home. And I think a lot of people are missing that piece, right? And the office just so happens to really set your mind of like, okay, I'm here, I'm working. I don't have the laundry going in the back and, have to do all these other things. And that is part of this whole conversation. It's not just the office, it's the symbolism of the office and what it does to our employees.
Yeah. And it might be a bit of a tangent, so sorry if you've got a question, but I think that's where workplace brand comes into it. And I feel quite bullish on this in terms of workplace has always been in the background. But I think now that, our spaces, whether that's the office, a third space, or however you want to phrase it, we have an opportunity now because we are at the table with the CFO and those types of things. And if our spaces aren't getting used, right, because our employees don't know about us, don't know about how they can gain benefit, I think there's a huge element there. And that's definitely something that's outside probably all of our comfort zones, because we've never really had to sell ourselves, because people have turned up, whereas now it's flipped on its head. So, how do we engage them to say, hey, use this space because of X, Y, and Z? How do we, make it appealing? I think that's going to be interesting and definitely something that I'm passionate about.
Yeah. Just to say, I thought I heard in the initial question too about sort of that Monday, Friday. Was that part of the question? But or maybe my mind just went to that. How do you entice them to come in? And we've done two things. One, on the flip side, is we surrendered. We just said Fridays just don't work, right? People are not coming in on Friday. And we also saw it even during the pandemic that work from home, was less on Friday, or people were getting a little bit annoyed if you would schedule a meeting on a Friday. So the firm embraced it. We call it Friday your way. And we've told everyone, come noon on Friday, don't schedule any meetings. I'm not supposed to take the day off necessarily, but it's an understanding that it's protected time, maybe catching up for the week. We're not requiring people to come into the office. So we just flat out said, all right, we get it. There's nothing we can do to entice people to come into our office on Friday. It just isn't working. But the other flip side was there are little things that we did do to make it a little bit more enticing. So again, relying on technology, spaces that used to only be available, say, to a partner or senior staff, because occupancy is low, we say, well, Fridays, we can adjust it to any day of the week, but right now it's for Mondays and Fridays. Anybody can reserve it. So if I want to come in as an associate and sit in a partner office on Monday, have at it. You're allowed to go do that. And we've seen a little uptick at that, where people are like, yeah, I have more choice now. So that was one of our ways of
Is that, Brian, is that because those, I don't know how that looks for PwC, but is that because those spaces are a bit more special? Like, why? I'm just intrigued to see, is it because they're underutilized, so it's a way
they are underutilized? Yeah. Traditionally, they were just available in closed offices, right? Or just available to partners or a director. It was based on staff class level. So we've adjusted it, and we can do it per location, right? So if we realize that it's actually Monday, Tuesdays, and Fridays are the low days in LA, fine, let anybody go use a partner office on Tuesday too. None of the offices are assigned, so there's not a lot of personal belongings or anything in there, but they were, restricted by level.
Got it.
Good, great input. And just had a comment in from Michael Walshane. This is a rocking forum. It's insightful, so thanks for that. And some great questions coming in from the attendees. Got a really interesting question from Ollie Dickinson from Fujitsu. So taking a slight change of direction now, asking about meeting presence equality, so the concept of equal meeting presence and fair participation, whatever the attendees location, home, office, or traveling, which I think is an interesting one. Be interested to hear what initiatives and kind of direction you're taking to help with those hybrid meetings. We've certainly found are a challenge, and making sure that everyone does have that level amount of participation. Can you kick off on that, Isabel?
Yeah, sure. So for us, we've adjusted a lot of our technology. We touched a little bit about the importance of collaboration and partnership with like the AV teams and the IT teams across each of our different businesses, but that is incredibly important. We've seen that adjusting the technology to allow any participant, whether you're in an office, in another office, or virtual, is really key to making sure everybody feels like they're part of whatever meeting or team they're having the conversation on. So we've made adjustments. We have a neighborhood planning as well. And within that, we have a team room. And the team room itself is more of a digital screen. So let's say you were to have a thought session or a type of opportunity where you're coming up with an idea. These screens are actually all touch screen. So you no longer have to use the old school, markers that maybe your camera doesn't give you great visibility on in a room. Well, now this is all digital, so that if I'm at home and my colleagues are in the office, whatever they're writing on the screen, I also see. So that's really a great opportunity for our teams to still feel connected, but not feel that sense of like, oh, everybody's in the office, but I didn't feel too comfortable going in and I missed something, right? We don't want that to happen. And so we've started implementing this type of software and technology in not just these type of rooms, but kind of out in the open office in those neighborhoods. We want people to feel like they are connected, and we use other tools as well. We use a lot of Slack to keep everybody in touch and collaborating on a conversation. So that's kind of a big moment for us. And we're a tech company, but we also don't want to have tech everywhere, right? Like we want to live in the future. We want to push for innovation, but I think keeping that as a nice portion throughout the office really guides people to move and interact with new areas, and also allow people that maybe if you are virtual, you're having that hesitancy of like, oh, I'm not sure if I want to come in, but you see that people are excited to be in the office. We've seen an uptick in people wanting to come in by word of mouth or by being on a call where you have seen other colleagues in a room that you're like, oh man, that looks really cool. I'll probably come in next week just to, take a look at it. So we've seen that be a positive.
Yeah, I was gonna say that loops back to also to our how to create that equity, screen presence equity to our difference makers, right? That I was talking about. So a lot of those are focused on, and I know it might sound simple or silly at first, but it really needs to be done, was just readdressing people. What does it mean to conduct a meeting now or a collaboration in this new hybrid environment, and giving them tips to do that. So we encourage our teams to do the difference makers, to really like create their own set of ritual, if you will, about how they are going to meet. It be everything from, we're not going to use marker whiteboards when we're in the room. We're only going to use the digital technology in front of us, or assigning roles to people and making sure that everyone has the ability to participate in the meeting and is recognized. So that's one of the things that we have been focusing on. And I would just say, and I say this at the same time saying we don't have it at PwC, but I keep telling them we need it, that if organizations are going to take this hybrid work style seriously, and it's probably an opportunity for those of us who are on this call, we need to step up and create roles that are, your chief hybrid experience officer, who is managing everything from the technical to, like I said, the ritual of how we are going to do it and training our people. I think that's going to be a vital role and opportunity, I think, for our community to step up and say, that's my new role, chief hybrid experience officer.
Yeah, I think you touched on it with the education, because the equality will come with educating people, like I suppose all type of equality. The more knowledge you share of how to do it and best practice, the potentially the better it will get. But I also think we've such a variety of people, and we all come back to tech, right? Because tech's in our life all the time. But there's so many skill gaps of, between someone who can use Zoom really competently and then someone has to flip and use an electronic whiteboard. You spend half the time explaining, where the mute button is, never mind where the pen is. So, there's that huge portion, I think, that needs to be educated on to help with the equality piece. And I don't know if you want some like everyone knows the practical stuff, hopefully, but we just set out 10 kind of rules in workplace and tried it of meeting etiquette. When you should have your video on, when you shouldn't, when meetings 55 minutes and all these types of usual type of things that we hear. But I'd say that helped to a degree, but it's then making sure that you can have the consistency, which is the problem.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. And, even how many things that we had to learn, 2 years ago, and things that we're going to have to unlearn. As I said, somebody might be at the front door as you go back in the office, checking to make sure you have your pants on when you go back to the physical space. But that being said, with the 55 minutes being something that we do at Space Store, I did want to take the last few minutes. Obviously, we talk about 2022, and we can just go around the table here. Isabel, what do you see? What would you like to see come out of 2022? after 2 years of learning remote working, hybrid working, boundaryless working. We can use all the cool terms, but what would you like to see?
I would love to see colleagues in offices. For us, we have opened a lot of amazing new locations that are really focused on that wellness and sustainability for our employees that not a lot of people have been able to experience. And so for me, it's really getting people to feel comfortable again, to get back into some type of routine and getting them to experience the spaces so that we could better understand how and what they need. We're always going to be adjusting and pivoting, and we're using technology like sensors to get a better understanding of how things are going to be used. But for us, really is just making sure our employees feel that safety, that we are doing the best that we can to create spaces for them that are equal, if not better, than their homes, and getting them back in the office to collaborate and really build that culture again.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian. What do you think for 2022?
Same exact thing. Our people coming back into the office, we're in the same position. We have some really great spaces, some of them that actually opened up during the pandemic. They had already been working on. But really getting them back in, and just that level of maintaining our culture at PwC and our productivity and being seen as leaders to our colleagues. This has been a fantastic time for people in our career, and seeing that continue to grow. So I would say for the coming year, it's really getting our people in and understanding, embracing the new ways of working, and stepping up on our side of what we do for the firm and others with workplace strategy and culture.
Yeah, and I think one interesting thing that you brought up earlier about different titles, chief hybrid officer, whatever it may be. I think really what we are seeing now is leadership coming together, saying, okay, if we're going to make this work, there may need to be new personnel or new ways that we do work, and people that bring that that insight to the table.
Right.
We have it even here, when we're having a discussion. Let's take something as practical as digital lockers. Everybody wants their personal storage. Now we're talking to HR, we're talking to IT, we're talking to IT security. So all these persons are coming together at a table that previously it just was left up to furniture planners or whoever, facilities
Exactly.
people.
Yeah.
And I think actually an opportunity to have broader discussions. That is one of the benefits that we've taken away from this. So sorry, Lewis, give us your, in the final minute here.
No,
your thoughts.
similar threads, right? But going on that HRIT workplace, like I kind of see that as like the employee experience organization. So it would be such a drastic change to put that underneath one bubble, right? Because that's massive. But I don't think it's out of the realms of possibility down the line, right? Because the lines are getting more blurred with that. So I think an opportunity is, or what I'm looking forward to is that I'd say within ServiceNow, it's definitely around wellness. And I'm interested to see how our role in workplace adapts and changes. I think speaking to my team members, everyone's kind of asking, what does that look like? And I encourage them to think of the same thing, some roles in workplace will become redundant at some point because of AI technology. So where can you add value? Where do you want to go and look at, And for ServiceNow, continuing our kind of workplace services product is a big focus as well. And I think as an industry, I'm excited to see what new companies are born out of this and the innovation. I find it fascinating. Obviously, there's a lot in prop tech at the moment, but I'm intrigued to see who's going to find a niche or something that comes out of this as well.
Yeah, very cool. Alex, any final thoughts?
No, it's been fascinating, and certainly really appreciate the insights from our panelists and also the questions from the audience. I think there's been some really interesting new themes and topics and tangents that we've discussed today, which I've certainly found it very interesting and learnt a lot. So nothing further to add.
Well, thank you all. Brian, Lewis, Isabel, thank you very much for taking the time, and thank you to all of our audience, both here on the Zoom platform and also on our live streaming platforms, for joining us today. Been very insightful. This recording will be made available on our website in the next few days. So please feel free to check that out and follow us for our next Insights webinar. And again, thank you all for joining. Enjoy your day, evening, morning, wherever you may be. And we'll look forward to catching up next time. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.